Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Having fun with technology today, and we do have 4 people watching, I think. No comments yet, though. Can everybody hear me? Let me see if I've got any messages on a slightly different parts of the phone. Because there's no point in me talking if nobody can hear. Let's make sure this is on. Am I being heard? No, there's somebody on, I think it's YouTube. I think I'm live. I'm putting messages on. Right, so YouTube's okay. Seeing the messages pop up there. If you're on, put your name in. Let us know who's on. If you're on, put your name in. Let us know who's on. If you're on, put your name in. Not a repetition. So this evening, I'm going to carry on from where Dave left off. We're looking at John chapter 11. Now, Dave read up to verse 34, I think it was. He left on Jesus wept. But I'm going to pick up on that and just look at where we are in the chapter. So a quick summary. Jesus has had a messenger come to him from Martha and Mary about Lazarus not being right. And he says, right, okay, we'll stay put for a couple more days because this sickness isn't going to end in death, or it's going to be for God's glory. So they hang around and then make the way, and they get to Bethany, and they're towards the household when Martha is the one, does the runner, runs out and meets Jesus and greets him with the words which potentially accusatory, because in theory Jesus could have just clicked his fingers when they received the messenger and made sure nothing would happen to Lazarus. But he didn't. So we're there, and Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. How amazing is that? That faith, that she's got the distress of a brother dying. He's been in the grave for a few days. They've got a house full of mourners. Mary sat there keeping them company for the moment, but still, faced with the fact of her brother dying, she's still got a faith in Jesus that if Jesus asked God for anything, he will give it to him. So it's like a hope beyond hope, realistically, isn't it? A hope beyond hope. I keep saying a husband, I don't know why. A brother died, and the brother is in the grave. But even now, Martha feels God can still bring him back. Couldn't he? Would he? Jesus says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. No one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Martha's response, yes, Lord, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Who comes into the house, however far away it is, to get hold of Mary. So Mary jumps up, runs out to meet Jesus, and all the mourners, all the official people, they jump up after her because they think she's going to go to mourn a little more at the tomb. Now, Mary, when she drops in front of Jesus, she just says, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But she didn't touch on anything else like Martha did. It was almost, there was no hope there. Her brother was dead. Yes, Jesus had turned water into wine. Yes, Jesus had made the blind see. He'd made the deaf hear. He cured skin diseases. And he'd raised a couple of other recently deceased. But could he really raise somebody that had died, had been in the grave for 4 days, and was suffering any form of, or any unknown amount of decomposition? So when I read that, I'm thinking, did she have hope? Or was it, yeah, well, if you'd have said something before he'd died, we'd be all right now. We read that Jesus saw her crying and looked at some of the Jews that were crying with her, and it says he was deeply moved in his spirit and he was troubled. And he asked the question, where have you put him? And at this point, they turn around and say, they told him, come and see. And they take him to the tomb. This is where we have the expression, the verse, Jesus wept. I've been thinking about that a lot over the last few days. And Dave touched on it last week. Jesus wept. Jesus knew exactly what was going to happen when he visited that tomb. He knew exactly what was going to happen with Lazarus. But the human side of Jesus came out when he saw people that he knew and he loved upset. It affected him as well. The people that were supporting Mary, in theory supporting, like the official mourners, and probably a few of the Pharisees, clerks with her making notes, that they're the ones taking snide comments at Jesus. Well, why couldn't he have stopped him from dying? Why did he cry? Now, dependent on what version of the Bible you look at, some of the older versions, King James, things like that, when you look at this message, this verse in the older, it says, he was deeply moved and in his spirit and troubled. Now, the original word under that sort of very sanitized expression, and it's actually printed out in full when you look at something like the King James Version. He says he was indignant with anger. What was he angry about? Angry enough to go to tears. In the more modern versions, it just says he was disturbed. He wasn't sure. Well, not he wasn't sure, but there was something inside him that affected him, and it got me looking at it from supporting them in joining in with the public mourning. Was he crying because of the unbelief of the people that were like the hangers-on, the professionals? Because we know later on in the passage that these people, some of them followed Jesus, but some of them jog off and go and report to the Pharisees about what has been happening. The other night when I was preparing for today, I actually read it through a few different versions, and I said, Lord, what made you cry? Why did you cry? You knew what was happening. You knew the joy that was coming back to their family. Why did you cry? And I just went to sleep on it. I woke up the next morning thinking, why, Lord? And one expression popped into my head. First thought of my mind, I could see my future. Jesus was stood there, surrounded by his friends, the people he loved, and he stood in front of this tomb. And he could see his own future. He knew that within a few days, weeks, that he would go through the horror of the cross. He would go through the excruciating pain himself. Now, when you look at some of the other commentators that are on, and I've looked at this previously, there is he's upset because of Mary, he's angry, but Jesus has wept previously, or we've heard about him weeping previously, particularly Jerusalem, sadness of the people he loved, the his empathy, see, which is always an amazing thing for me. And just upset, my eyes will fill up, and she starts taking the mickey. Jesus, when he looked over Jerusalem and wept, by the people at the side of Lazarus' tomb, by the people in Jerusalem, and reject that lasting peace that comes through God.